Hi, I'm Kincaid and welcome to my tutorial for my track Thirds, which is coming out on Inside Out Records. It's part of a 3-track EP. I'm going to run through the different components of this song and I hopefully shed some light on how I work, maybe how I formulate ideas for the track, and just the general structure and feel of this particular piece. I guess it's probably a good way to start, and actually interesting that the way this song starts is pretty much how I had the idea started to form anyway. I tend to start things in a 16-bar loop, play everything in mainly on MIDI, and kind of build the idea from one sound, and then layer it and layer it and layer it. So I actually started with this. This is the first part of the track that gave me ideas. I quite like starting with textures like this. It's quite, there's a lot of different ranges in it, and it seemed to spark off a few different ideas for other sounds to incorporate into it. So I've got these elements, well, just... So I've already tried to kind of like give the sense that this track's going to be quite pacey. I've got this conga part that I played in on a drum, and I tried to create a lot of space with the elements that I use. Even though it sounds relatively busy, I like to make sure that obviously, as any producer would, you want to give everything space. And this one I've tried to give it as much movement as possible, and that's kind of been what I wanted with each element of this, is to have freedom of movement in it, while still kind of feeling like it's a dance floor track. So on here I've got a delay running, I've got a little reverb unit, another reverb, and this step effect, which is actually subtly panning, and also has a tiny little gate on the reverb on it, and a little filter as well. Kind of just makes more of that singular element, brings it out a little bit more. So then I've also got, running underneath this, I've got these, another sort of counter percussion part, which again is just like speeding up the pace. I've got this panning from side to side to give a bit more depth to that range in the drums. And obviously the hook that you can hear, the kind of the vocal, I kind of wanted to go for a bit of like a slightly jungly sounding and staccato use of the vocal in this. So I actually took it from this Yugoslavian experimental piece that I came across on some very strange YouTube account. Pretty wonky. So I just chopped out the sections that I heard in it that I liked. I didn't actually want to do too much to this in terms of like altering the sound, just because I really enjoyed what I heard in the original track, and it seemed to fit very well with that texture at the start. It's kind of similar ranges, and yeah, it's just really an odd sound without using anything kind of like standard jungly sound. It's quite interesting to try and make something from such a different type of music or different sound altogether. And yeah, so on that I've just got a tremolo again, just creating depth, space. I've got another panning delay, and I've just got a little bit of compression and a little bit of saturation on it as well, but like absolute minimal kind of post-production on it really. And now let's get into the rhythm sectiony bits. So I've got, I think this has been one of the early tracks that I started on Logic X. So I actually only moved from 9 around the start of lockdown. So I'm using a lot of the alchemy synths I noticed when I went through this, which are really, really good. I've just treated them, a really small amount. I've got a wet filter, a little bit of this post-production thing, which is like a little tape delay mastering effect. But yeah, this particular thing is brilliant. You can really warp this in alchemy. So this is kind of just creating like an underlayer. You can hear, you can really fuck around with the sounds quite a lot. But it's creating like an underlayer to everything else. And again, like adding more texture and depth to the other elements that are already there. So all together, let's hear the rhythm. And then obviously with the bass part underneath, which is kind of acting as the kick drum for the time being. And I've added this this arp here again to kind of like it seemed I want every single element to almost follow the same rhythm. I don't want things overcomplicating. I want there to be a constant like build up in this section, so I try to make things pan and be quite busy sounding without it being overcomplicated, I guess. So yeah, that's that little part. And now we're coming into the first breakdown, where I kind of really wanted to like switch everything up. So this sample you can hear here is again taken from that Yugoslavian experimental piece. I mean, the track's like, I think it's like 10 minutes long, just people making weird noises. So there's lots to choose from. And I've just got a little tremolo on here and a gate, a delay. I haven't even actually got a limiter or compressor or anything on this one. Again, that's because I kind of really enjoyed the sound as it was. I didn't really feel it needed it. I felt it might squash it a bit too much if I added anything else. So yeah, this breakdown. I'm trying to create some tension and space, give a little bit of relief before the kind of dancey section comes in. Got some funky laser noises in here. Just this little thing. I've actually converted this into audio purely for the purposes of allowing Logic X to run, because there's a lot going on here. Again, tremolo, lots of post-production stuff, so it's quite a lot for the CPU to handle on my computer anyway. So for this section, I've actually dropped the octave on the bass sound that you hear in the intro. Obviously brought in the low end again, which I'd taken out previously. And I've got that running alongside this kick. And actually, the first time I made this song, I listened to the mix down again on my other housemate speakers, and it was really falling short of having any punch to it. I think that can happen quite a lot if you're listening at a certain level at home. And obviously if you have another set of speakers, great, in the house, it's really good to kind of A/B it against that. But I actually went back and then changed the kick altogether, and took that out and did a little fiddle around with the bass noises, and kind of beefed it up. So all this has got on it, it's actually, I'm pretty sure this is like a Logic X basic that just comes with it, techno kick. I don't even think I particularly tuned this one. All I've done is add some overdrive, obviously done the obvious things you would do with the EQing, and a little bit of compression on it, and I've kind of let it just sit in between the low frequency of the bass that I've dropped, and this is then playing together the other bass. So I really wanted that to fill out that mid and low section, and and also still has a lot of texture to it as well, which I was really trying to get. I've also got some hi-hats here, panning around the top half of the mix, again trying to create some space. All together. So it's that main arc coming back in again. So trying to create a little bit of consistency through the song to tie it together, and also creating lots of pace as well. And I've got a few other new elements that I've put into this. Let's see if any of these. But again, these are kind of just like subtle things that are just layering underneath, rather than being like a main focal point of the track. It kind of just adds a little bit more depth. It took me a little while to sort of position those. Again, this is something I've bounced into audio so it can run. It's another Alchemy synth. I don't really see if I've actually got much automation going. No automation on this. It's just, yeah, really simple like underlayer that I just wanted almost to add a little bit of extra melody and depth to this section, so it sounds more intense. Now we're in the dancing section of it. Okay, let's see what happens next. And here you can kind of hear me having like a lot of fun with the Alchemy synth, where you can really warp those sounds. So this is the kind of like the bridge section, I guess. You know, winding down but still keeping some of that energy from the previous breakdown, and I kind of want to give a sense there's going to be change, there's creating tension and stuff like that. I try and do that in most of my songs. I give space and you know, like make sure there is an obvious change in the sounds and keep it evolving. I think is important for me. I mean, maybe even that's just me producing. I like to have change as well in it. And to keep it constantly moving around, rather than it just being an obvious structure of you know, sounds repeating themselves. It's also more fun for me to make as well. So a lot of this section, as I'm finishing it off, I'm kind of just like going back through with the MIDI keyboard or adding extra sounds in as I go and just jamming on it. So this is how this next section comes about, actually. So you've got. So I really like this kind of IDM-y sound that came between this pad that's really lovely and full, like it's kind of filling out that mid and high section, and I've got this, yeah, the Alchemy synth again, which I just was in love with when I started fiddling around with Logic X, just purely because of what you can do with it texturally. You know, it sounds brilliant as well. And these parts seem to work really nicely together. A little break from the harshness of the rest of the track. Still lots of melody. So yeah, it seemed to lend themselves together very, very nicely. So yeah, you can hear this section carries on for a while. And in this part I really wanted to strip this back even more than I did in the first breakdown, just because it's the finale of the song. You want to give it space, you want to create ultimate tension. I quite like how it focuses on the highs in the track, and this again, that drum synth is like really grating and jarring. You're kind of like waiting for the lows and the mids to come back in, almost like, I mean, for me that feels like the logical next thing to come back. It makes you want to hear the full range of sounds again. Oh, and I do have a lot of stuff running here through this track, so I'm just going to move some of this back, just like that. So again, because I bring everything back in here for the final part. So you can hear I've brought everything back in for this finale section, the full range of all the sounds going off together, which is what I wanted after the initial slightly mellow breakdown, and then stripping it back, keeping it just a few sounds, and bringing it all back in together for kind of a final punch or whatever. So yeah, that is the final part of it. Let's see how I kind of run this out. Me having some fun with the laser noise there, clearly at the end. So for this last section, I've literally just done a run-off, purely, I mean, really for the purposes of being able to play this in the club, which is, I used to not do this at all, but it really is, it's quite a nice way to round off the track. It makes the tracks more playable. Yeah, I think it lends itself nicely. You kind of need a bit of wind down after all the weirdness I just shoved in there at the end. So yeah, that is the overall view of thirds. I hope that was useful to somebody. Please feel free to drop me a message on Instagram or Facebook and ask me if there's anything specific you'd like to know. So yeah, hope I did a decent job on that. Thank you very much for watching.